السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن سيدنا محمد عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وبعد. Dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, today inshallah ta'ala we're going to discuss the main lessons in juz number 28 inshallah ta'ala. And tonight, as we all know, it's the third last night of Ramadan. Tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, is going to be the second last. And then, inshallah ta'ala, this Friday is going to be last night of Ramadan. So try to invest in these 3 nights, inshallah ta'ala, and increase your dua to Allah Azza wa Jal, increase your ibadat. And as I said before, you don't have to do a lot of ibadat until you feel that you're overwhelmed or you cannot handle this anymore. You can just add a little bit of ibadat. If you used to pray Isha by yourself, try to pray Isha with your family. If you used to pray Fajr by yourself, pray to your family. If you used to pray it with your family, just try to add a little bit of more dua or recite 1 page of the Quran or attend this halaqah, just to add a little bit of ibadah. Don't do too much so you don't feel overwhelmed, because Ramadan is already difficult because we're fasting every single day. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for all of us. Today I was extremely exhausted to the extent that I prayed Maghrib sirri instead of jahri. You know, in Maghrib when you recite, you should recite out loud. In the second rak'ah when I was praying Maghrib today, I prayed actually the second rak'ah secretly, like sirri, because I was really exhausted, and then I realized that it's Maghrib and I had to raise my voice. That's how exhausted I am. But by the way, the ruling, if you recite in the prayer that's sirri, you recite jahri, like for example the prayer is out loud like Maghrib and you recite sirri and you forgot, that's absolutely fine, because reading sirri or jahri is sunnah. You don't even have to pray sujood al-sahw, you don't have to repeat your prayer if this happened to you, just in case. طيب, before I start, inshallah ta'ala, we all, or most of us, we have received the sad news of our brother Ahmed Shima. And the brother Ahmed Shima is actually, he passed away. He passed away yesterday, and he just passed away just right before Maghrib, and he was fasting. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the good news about this sad news is that Rasulullah said, "Man khutima lahu bisiyami yawmin dakhala al-jannah." Whoever dies while he's fasting, Jannah is guaranteed for him, inshallah ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Jannah is guaranteed for that person. He's inshallah going to make it to Jannah. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. Ahmed, he was a hafiz, and I actually have introduced him in my masjid in the iOS here to pray Taraweeh with me, not Taraweeh, Tahajjud, for the last 3 years, because you know Hafiz Abdul Rahman, mashallah, he has been leading with me in the iOS for like 6 years now. And sometimes when Abdul Rahman doesn't have time, or even if he's there, he would introduce Ahmed, who passed away, Ahmed Shima, to lead with us or read instead of Abdul Rahman if he's busy. And that's how I got to know Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala. He used to pray tahajjud with us at the masjid. Everybody heard his voice, actually praised him. His voice was very beautiful, and his tajweed was very decent. I liked his tajweed, and I loved his recitation, rahimahullah ta'ala. And I think he was a very decent student. He's very young, 24 years old, subhanallah ta'ala, and his family is in Saudi. So it's very difficult for someone who lives in himself and family is living elsewhere to pass away in this young age. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower His mercy on him. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. He just started his own business actually very recently, and he also invited me once he started his business, but I couldn't go because I was at a conference in Winnipeg, so I couldn't attend that day. But alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, yani, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate his ranks in Jannah with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the rest of the prophets and messengers. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. And to grant his family patience and to grant them faith, ya rabbil alameen. Ameen. These difficult times. I actually shared a post today with people how to offer janazah prayer on him, because I received a lot of questions, especially from our funeral committee members, some members in our funeral committee, and also some members from the community, how to offer janazah on Hafiz Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, or anybody else who passed away during this pandemic and we cannot congregate at the masjid, we cannot offer janazah prayer. And the answer to this is In situations like this, we pray what's called Salatu al-Ghaib. But Salatu al-Ghaib is not something that we do to everyone who passed away. Not to everyone who passed away. Some people try to do it for political reasons, for some political leaders, and we don't do that in our iOS masjid. We don't do that. But we just speak from Islamic perspective in general. When somebody passes away, and especially throughout this pandemic, when you want to offer janazah prayer on him, we call this Salatul Ghaib. Al-Ghaib is absent. So we offer prayer for him because he's absent and you cannot attend in the same place where the deceased person is there and his body is there. Or in a case like Brother Ahmed nowadays, it's a pandemic and we cannot go to the masjid to offer janazah prayer. So what we can do is to pray by yourself at home, or you can pray even in jama'ah with your family at home. On Salatul Janazah, as I posted today on my Facebook and in the masjid's post as well, iOS page, this page, that you have to make 4 takbirat, Allahu Akbar, 4 times. You want to raise your hands in the first takbirah only, or in the 4 takbirat, that's optional. You can raise it only in the first time, or you can raise your hands with every single takbirah in the 4 takbirat. After the first takbirah, you recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and all of us memorize Al-Fatiha. After the second takbirah, you make salawat on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in any form that you memorize. Just send salutation on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After third takbirah, you make dua for brother Hafiz Ahmad Shima rahimahullah ta'ala. After the fourth takbirah, you make dua for all believing men and women who passed away, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have mercy on them. Don't forget before that to, of course, face the Qibla, have the intention and make wudu before all this. So after this brief introduction, I would go now to the lessons that we have in Juz 28. And I'm going to make it as brief as possible. I'm only going to discuss things that we have not mentioned before, just for the sake of time. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us this series, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and our journey with the Quran throughout the month of Ramadan. As I told you tonight, I was extremely exhausted. I even prayed Maghrib silently, because second rak'ah, because I was exhausted in the prayer. But I insisted that I have to do it, the halaqah, no matter what, just to complete the series and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us. Inshallah ta'ala, al-ajru ala qadri al-mashaqqa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to reward us based on how hard it is for us to do that righteous deed. Okay, so the first point here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he starts Juz number 28 with a chapter, a surah that's called Al-Mujadila. SubhanAllah. And just reflecting on the reason why this surah was revealed and the name of this surah will teach us how Islam values women and how Islam cares about marriage. How marriage is important in our religion. Extremely important, this concept of marriage, and starting this first foundation of any Muslim community is a Muslim family. What is the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this surah? First and foremost, the word al-mujadila means what? Remember when we were talking about our relation with Ahlul Kitab, people of the scripture, we said, Allah said what? وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ. Do not argue with the people of the scripture, right? So the word mujadala here comes again, the same root. Tujadilu, mujadala. Mujadala or mujadila is the pleading woman. The pleading woman. There was a woman, radiallahu anha, by the name of Khawla bint Tha'laba. Khawla bint Tha'laba. She was a companion, female companion. She was married to a Sahabi, radiallahu anhu, by the name of Aus ibn Samit. طيب. And Sayyidina Aus, radiallahu anhu, he was way older than his wife Khawla. So Khawla radiallahu anha, she came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and she was describing her situation and said, Ya Rasulullah, that Aus is much older than me, as you know. وَكَبُرَ سِنُّهُ وَسَاءَ خُلُقُهُ. It's become very difficult to deal with him. It's difficult to even talk to him, to have a conversation with him. And it's difficult. And then she said one time he came from work, and when he came home, رَاجَعْتُهُ فِي شَيْءٍ. I talked to him about something, I was saying my opinion regarding something, and actually he disagreed with me, And we started to fight verbally until he told me out of his anger, أنت علي كظهر أمي. He never told her you're divorced. Because if he told her you're divorced, she would know that now it's haram for her to come near him. But he told her another expression that Arabs used to say at that time, أنت علي كظهر أمي. You're to me like the back of my mother, meaning you're haram for me to come near you. I cannot come near you, you're haram, just like my mother. I cannot have intimacy with you. That's what he meant. And then ذهب إلى نادي قومه ثم رجع. And then he was so angry, he left the house. And that also teaches us when the husband is angry, he is the one who leaves the house, not the wife. The wife has nowhere else to go. If he is mad, he goes outside, but she stays. And we're going to, inshallah, see this in Surah At-Talaq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the homes, he said, these are the homes of women, not the homes of the husband. Allah said, لا تخرجوهن من بيوتهن. Her right is to stay in her house, even throughout her iddah, after even you divorce her, to stay in her house. لا تخرجوهن من بيوتهن. You're not allowed to kick her out of the house. Because, we have a huge problem in North America, especially for women who get abused, for example, or who get kicked out of their homes and they have nowhere else to go. And we have a huge problem that we cannot have shelters for them, right? Like from the Muslim community, something for the Muslim community to do for our sisters. We have this problem a lot in our community. A husband who doesn't want to divorce, or who already divorced his wife and she doesn't know where to go. And she starts to go to a women's shelter, and we need to find something for them in our community, inshallah ta'ala. Or we need also to have a Muslim court as well to be able to handle these problems and for these sisters to be able to get divorced if they want to, when the life with her husband becomes impossible. So it's a huge problem that I receive almost every other day, and every other Imam in North America received this problem, and we know this very well. But the solution is not in our hands because we don't have the authority. All what we can do is to provide Islamic guidance, and then people who have authority are the people who can do that. Not only organizations. I'm not talking about masajid, the board of directors of the masajid. No, I'm talking about the country where we live. We need to be able to approach the government and be able to provide something for our sisters who need shelters within the frame of the government. We don't work by ourselves. We cannot take this responsibility in our shoulder as Muslim community or Muslim organizations. Okay, so she said, Ya Rasulullah, he told me, أنت عليك ظهر أمي. You're just like the back of my mother. You're haram for me to come near you. And then when he came back, after he went outside, sat down with some of his friends, and then he came back, رضي الله عنه سيدنا أوس بن الصامت, قالت فأرادني. And he wanted to come near me. He wanted to, deal with me as if we're still married. I said, no, you're not going to come near me until I go to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to know what Allah says about this situation. Are we still married or not? After he said what he said. When she went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look, Rasulullah didn't have an answer for that question at that moment. He waited for the answer. All what he said, إن زوجك رجل كبير فاتق الله فيه. He said, Nabi said to her, your husband is an old man, go take care of him and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding your husband. That's all what he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then he waited. He said, ما أراك إلا قد حرمت عليه. I think you're now forbidden for him to come near you, because he said that أنت عليك ظهر أمي. You're like my mother to me. And then she started to argue with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The conversation is going now two ways. She's not just asking a question and getting an answer because there is no revelation yet. She said, Ya Rasulullah, لكنه لم يقل كلمة الطلاق. He never said you're divorced. He never said talaq. He only said أنت علي كظهر أمي. It's another expression that Arabs used to use. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam waited. He doesn't have an answer. He waited until the revelation came down, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in ayah number 123 in Surah Al-Mujadala that this practice is haram. It's haram to tell my wife something that harsh like this, and she doesn't know if she's divorced or not. This practice has to stop. That's called dhihar in the Muslim community. It has to end. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talked about the compensation or the expiation, the kafara for this sin. If you do it and you say to your wife, you're like my mother, that's haram in the first place. And then there's kafara for this that you have to pay or you have to do before you go back to your wife. الذين يظهرون منكم من نسائهم ثم يعودون لما قالوا فتحرير رقبة من قبل أن يتماسا. If he wants to go back to his wife after he says what he says, he has to free a slave. Otherwise, فمن لم يجد فصيام شهرين متتابعين من قبل أن يتماسا. He has to fast 2 consecutive months, not 60 days. 2 consecutive months. They can be 60 days, they can be less. فمن لم يجد فإطعام 60 مسكينا. But if he cannot fast because of his physical ability, he has to feed 60 needy people. Look how bad this sin in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to say a bad word to my wife that will make her feel that she's not wanted in my life anymore, and she's not sure if I'm married or not, should I stay in this house or not. We need to care for our spouses, even emotions and mental health. And Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, she was sitting down in the same room when Khawla radiallahu anha came to talk to Nabi sallallahu, and she said, تبارك الذي وسع سمعه الأصوات. She said, Subhanallah al-Azim, Allah can hear everything. لقد جاءت المجادلة. This pleading woman, Khawla radiallahu anha, came to Nabi sallallahu to talk to him. She was talking to him, and I am in the other side of the room, and I cannot hear what she's saying. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heard her from above 7 heavens, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ended the first ayah saying, he actually started saying, قَدْ سَمِعَ Allah. Allah has heard this conversation. And then he ended the ayah saying, إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Surely Allah is all hearing, all seeing. Even if Sayyidah Aisha was in the same room, she couldn't hear her, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heard what she's saying. So that's the first lesson that we can learn. The first surah in juz number 28 is to care for our spouses. The husbands care for their wives, the wives care for their husbands. And at the time of divorce, we have also some other instructions in the Quran how to divorce. We have Surah At-Talaq as well in the same juz here, juz 28. We have some instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just going to mention them very briefly. One of the instructions, for example, in the first ayah in Surah At-Talaq, Allah said, do not force women out of their homes. The problem that I talked about, the problem of women shelters that we need to have sometimes in some critical situations that happen in our community and in every other community, especially in North America, right? Because we don't live in a Muslim country, they don't know where to go. If she's being abused, she cannot go to a women's shelter because there is no shelter for her, or she cannot even get a divorce because there is no Muslim court. And the husband tells her, you're not divorced. According to Islam, you're still my wife. لا يحل. لا يحل. If there is an Imam's council, this Imam council can divorce her from you. You cannot just let her like that. You're not divorced and you're not married, suspended. What is that? That's abuse. That cannot happen. And then eventually what they do, sisters, they go and get divorced from a non-Muslim court. And we have to abide by the law of the country where we live. It's a huge problem. In some other provinces, we have imams councils who issue fatwas for this, and they get women divorced. But here we don't do that because we don't really have imams council in Saskatchewan yet. I hope, inshallah ta'ala, later on when we have more imams or more masajid, we'll be able to have a council, inshallah ta'ala, to solve problems like this. So the second instruction regarding divorce, Allah mentioned in Surah At-Talaq. The surah, the 28th juz, is called At-Talaq, divorce. The second instruction, Allah said, be mindful of Allah and put your trust in Him. Verse 2 and 3, Surah At-Talaq. Verse 2 and 3, Surah At-Talaq, Allah is telling us when there is any fight between the husband and wife, or khalas, it's impossible to live together, we're going to divorce. At that time, everyone has to keep in mind that he's dealing first and foremost with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know people, when it comes to this huge disputes, huge fights, they go to the court, everybody has his own lawyer, they pay a lot of money, and they end up regretting all what they have done. I understand that. But if we both know that we have Islamic rights and Islamic responsibilities, none of us is going to abuse the other. That's the most important point here. She takes her right and he takes her right, and we leave each other peacefully if it's impossible to live together. We've tried everything. We've brought mediators from all sides to try to work on this, and nothing worked out. Now we decided we're going to divorce. Just do it peacefully for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and have Allah always in front of you. Always don't put Allah out of the equation. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's always inside with us, in my heart. Put Him within the equation. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third instruction in S6 and 7, Allah said, husbands must provide for wives and let them where you live, and let them live where you live during their iddah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking also about the importance of husbands providing for their wives, as I said before when I was explaining the word قوامون قوامون, and she has the right to stay in her own house where she used to live with her husband during her iddah after the first or the second divorce. So the next point, yes, the etiquettes of secret talks. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is even telling us here instructions on how to speak to one another. He said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وتناجوا بالبر والتقوى واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون. He said, O believers, when you have private conversation, let it not be for sin, aggression, or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It reminded me of something when I, for example, give my classes on Zoom. And then my students are chatting sometimes during the class, and I don't know. The way I know that they're talking is sometimes instead of sending messages to each other, they send it to all. And then when I look at these messages, honestly, I don't understand anything. Look, wallahi, their language that they speak with each other is completely different from the language that they use when they talk to me. At least I'm talking about myself as an imam or as a teacher. I don't know what they do with their parents, but when they talk to each other, it's very difficult to understand for us, people not born and raised here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about things like this. He's not talking about my students, He's talking about private conversations. If you're going to talk to each other like that, and there's a third person, he's in the same gathering, make sure you're not backbiting him. You're not talking about any kind of sin. You're not talking about any evil plan or anything that you're plotting against him, because sometimes he might feel sad even though you're not talking about him. There's nothing about him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا النَّجْوَى, these secret talks, these private talks, مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, especially for three people, that's from the shaitan. He made two people speak and let that third lift out like that. لِيَحْزُنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, because he wants to make the believers sad. He wants to make him mentally unstable. He keeps thinking, are they talking about me? What's going on? And he's always mentally unstable, right? لِيَحْزُنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, but Allah is saying, وَلَيْسَ بِضَارِّهِمْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, nothing is going to harm you without Allah's permission. When you see two people, for example, in a gathering, when you're three talking, or you're four and three are talking, and you're left out like that, or for example, it happens sometimes when you're in a gathering and people are talking a different language. That is even sometimes more painful because they don't know what's going on. You're sitting in a gathering and, for example, the common language is English and people are talking Arabic. And there's someone who's a convert or he's a Canadian who doesn't know Arabic. Or you're sitting down with some brother speaking Urdu instead of Arabic or English, and you don't know what's going on. Speaking the common language because you don't want to have one person feeling bad or sad that he's left alone, and he starts to think, are you talking about me? And he starts developing this thought in his mind. So Allah's talking about this in ayah number 9 and ayah number 10 in Surah Al-Mujadala, which is chapter 58. Just to make sure to not have these private conversations and let someone else be left out like this, unless you're talking about something good or you're going to benefit him somehow without him knowing this. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about honoring the immigrants, supporters, and the latter believers. in Surah Al-Hashr, Al-Muhajirun wal-Ansar, and وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا. You can find this. Allah talked about Al-Muhajirun, the immigrants, in ayah number 7, and Al-Ansar in ayah number 8, and about the believers who will come after them, the next generations. Allah talked about them in ayah number 9, and that's in Surah Al-Hashr. Surah Al-Hashr is 59. Al-Muhajirun wal-Ansar, and the latter believers, 7, 8, and 9. What else? The next point here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're going to go to Surah Al-Saf, verse 2 to 4. Allah said, do what you say. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون. O believers, why do you say what you don't do? Why do you say what you don't do? Especially for people who do da'wah. If you're going to do da'wah and ask people to do something good, you need to make sure that you're doing it first. But you know what? Shaitan sometimes comes from this gate. He comes to us and tells you, you know what? If you don't do what you're telling people to do, now this means you're a hypocrite or you're evil. And our scholars, when we used to ask them this question, because we started our da'wah at Al-Azhar at a very early age. We started giving khutbas at 12. When I was 12 years old, we started giving khutbas. And of course, we have to live as any other young man, another young person. We have fun, not haram fun of course, but we don't implement everything that we're saying in our khutbas. Like 12 years old, like this short, and this talking to people to have taqwa. And he doesn't even know what taqwa is, right? That was like 2 years ago. And then we got our sheikhs, we're hypocrites. Like, we're doing this, I don't believe in what I'm doing. And then they tell us that's actually one of the gates of the shaitan, that he can come to you through this gate to tell you, if you're not doing the same thing, you're evil, so you need to stop. No. Look, scholars always say that just continue and do what you can, and then later on, you're gonna learn Iman. I'm not sure about the narration, what it says, but the meaning of the conversation that they learned knowledge first, and then al-Iman, and then Iman came later. And I cannot remember the quote now to mention it. I cannot remember the saying, but it says that you learn knowledge first, and then Iman comes later. Because Iman is something that has to build up. Nobody becomes a mu'min overnight. Nobody's gonna change overnight. Just do da'wah. Even if you don't do everything on the spot, have knowledge, teach people. Later on, you're gonna change. This is gonna have an impact on you. Don't let the shaitan come to you through this gate. As much as you can, do what you tell people to do. كَبُرَ مَقْتًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَن تَكُونُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. It's actually a major sin in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I tell people to do something and I don't do it. Again, as much as I can. Allah said, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. There is here an offer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us. It's in Surah As-Saf, 10 and 11. And I'm going to talk about this offer, inshallah ta'ala, on Friday in our fundraiser. Because this offer actually is about donating and like building communities. And that's what I'm going to, inshallah, reflect on. One of the ayat that I'm going to reflect on Friday, inshallah, on fundraiser at 9 p.m. And I invite all of you, inshallah, to register ASAP, as soon as possible. Go to my page or the iOS Facebook page, this page, and register. Write down your first and last name, your email. You will receive an email to join the Zoom fundraiser, inshallah, ta'ala, this Friday at 9 p.m. Inshallah, azza wa jal. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop here, inshallah ta'ala. I think I'm gonna stop here. Or you know what? We took some lessons from Surah Al-Mujadala, Surah Al-Saf, Surah Al-Hashr, Surah Al-Talaq. Let's take one lesson from Surah Al-Tahrim. From Surah Al-Tahrim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us one tip on how to deal with people in general and with our spouses in particular. What we call this at-taghaful. Taghaful is different from ghafla. Ghafla is heedlessness. Ghafla is when something happens around me and I don't notice it at all, or I don't understand it. That's a ghafla, heedlessness. But taghaful is to see what's happening, to notice it, and sometimes not talk about it. Don't talk about everything, especially when it comes to problems. You know, especially nowadays when we're sitting at home and husbands see stuff that they didn't used to see before the pandemic, right? Like, for example, wives now get a lot of feedback from their husbands, like feedback on the kitchen, feedback on the way they cook, feedback on the cleanliness of the house, feedback on taking care of the bed, or arranging the bed and organizing the kitchen, stuff like that. A lot of feedback from the husbands that makes the wife sometimes unhappy, right, and annoyed, because we're not supposed to be giving comments on everything that's happening around us, and all of us need to work on this. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal radiallahu anhu said, تسعة أعشار حسن الخلق في التغافل. He said 90% of good manners is in this taghaful. Taghaful is to pretend that you did not hear what hurts you, to pretend that you did not hear what annoys you. Because you know what? All of us have stuff that annoys us, things that we hate that happens around us, things that we hear from people, so we need to pretend. That's called taghaful. You don't have to mention everything that you have in your mind, because it might create more problems. As a husband, you know, you have to keep your mouth shut. talking about myself. I have to keep my mouth shut sometimes, because if you open your mouth regarding some topics, as a husband, I'm talking about myself, it might create more problems. Just keep our profile here regarding some problems. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that Rasulullah used to have this strategy in his house. When can I find this? In Surah At-Tahrim, which is the last chapter in juz number 28, chapter 66. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in ayah number 3, عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْض. He presented to her part of what was disclosed, and he overlooked a part. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he mentioned a part of the problem to be solved. That part that he mentioned, alayhi sallam, can solve the problem, but he overlooked the other part because it might create more problems and make the situation even worse. That's a part of his wisdom, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that we try to learn from his wife, alayhi sallam. So these are some of the lessons here. As I said to you, I only mentioned the stuff that I have never mentioned before throughout the juz, and there are a lot of themes in the Quran that are repeated. There are some things that are unique to every juz, and we only mentioned today what is unique to juz number 28. Issues about talaq, issues about domestic abuse, issues about da'wah, doing what I say to people, and also some issues about how to deal with my spouse, how the husband should deal with his wife, how the wife deals with her husband. We also talked about the offer that Allah has given us that we're going to address inshallah ta'ala this Friday at 8:30. And let's see if I have any comments or any questions, inshallah. Do all four madhahib of Imam Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Malik and Ahmad all have same ruling about talaq, that divorce happens when ordered by the husband? I mean, the issue of divorce is much more complicated than this. It's much more complicated than this. To the extent that some scholars said, if you said the word taliq, if you said it taliq, which is like Egyptian slang, it's not formal Arabic. If you say taliq with hamza, because that's the way we speak as Arabs. Like for example, the word iqra. When we speak Egyptians, we don't say iqra like that. We say iqra with hamza instead of qaf. So taliq is the formal Arabic. But if you say taliq, some scholars don't think it counts. But of course the majority is if the talaq is sarih, like it's sarih means it's an obvious word. It cannot have any other meaning. That means it counts. Does taliq and taliq, or you're divorced in English, for example, or in your language, a word that has no other meaning. You're divorced. That means khalas, our life together has ended. But what is extremely important is any question about divorce, it cannot be addressed in public. That's very important. Like even our biggest scholars, like our grand imams of Al-Azhar and our grand imam of Al-Azhar, grand mufti of Egypt, when he receives a question in a TV show, for example, about divorce, he doesn't answer it. He only gives general guidelines, and then he asks people to go to Darul Ifta, to Al-Azhar itself, to ask the question, or to call and ask the question. Because the mufti is like a physician, like a doctor. He's going to ask you too many questions based on your intention, based on how you said the talaq, how did you pronounce it, when were you and your wife, what are the circumstances under which you pronounce this talaq. And then based on that, he's going to issue his fatwa. But generally speaking, there is difference between talaq al-sarih and al-kinaya. Al-sarih, it's obvious, it's clear, it's direct. That's a talaq, according to all the scholars. And kinaya, we have some explanations regarding kinaya, which is indirect talaq. Like if you go from, if you do this, you're gonna be divorced, for example. Or you're not my wife anymore. He did not say divorced. He just said, you're not my wife anymore. Or أنت عليك ظهر أمي, the case we talked about today. It's called dhihar. You're to me like my mother. I mean, what do you mean by that? It doesn't mean talaq. It doesn't mean talaq. You can go back to your wife, but just do the expiation for this. So these are just some guidelines, as I mentioned, and any talaq has to be addressed like issue by issue. يعني. بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم فاستغفروا من كل ذنب وغفران. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.